The Mech Touch. Chapter 18. Life. Watching the Seventh Snake's replays impressed Vess. The mech pilot's flamboyant piloting of his Seraphim showed a remarkable mastery of its capabilities. The Seraphim domineeringly claimed the skies, fighting particularly well against other flyers, and launched aggressive attacks against opponents on the ground. Though Vess knew little of mech piloting, he still recognized the Seventh Snake's remarkable skill. His aggressive playstyle and continuous risk-taking hid a keen sense of timing. If this snake wasn't at the threshold of promoting to silver, he was absolutely in the upper tier of Bronze League. When Vess noted that the Seventh Snake had come online and entered matchmaking, he chose to spectate his match. What he saw of the young pilot's performance reaffirmed his judgment. Snake piloted the Seraphim in ways even Vess hadn't imagined. But does he have the X factor? Good piloting didn't necessarily mean one has the X factor. Disregarding the phenomenon's vague definition, the X factor might not even work in a virtual reality environment. Perhaps the Seventh Snake was only a good pilot, and nothing more. Still, Vess believed it would be beneficial to his understanding of his mechs if he had a talk with the pilot. When Vess initiated a call, the mech pilot answered immediately. "Hello. I saw you spectating my last match. Who are you?" "I'm the mech designer who created the Seraphim variant you're piloting." "Wow," the pilot gasped. "No wonder I found your nickname familiar. So you're the famous Fantasia customizer. I'm researching a new project, and I need some feedback from the people who pilot my older work. Can you spare me a moment of your time?" "Yes." Vess was taken aback at the Seventh Snake's enthusiasm. This was the first time since he became a mech designer that someone afforded him respect. "Hey, calm down, kid. I just want your thoughts on some stuff, so don't be too stiff," Vess told the player, hoping he wouldn't be paralyzed into silence. "Let me ask you my first question. Your records show that you've been piloting the Seraphim ever since you bought it. What makes you stick with the model? I think you must have realized by now that it isn't the best mech in its weight class." The Seventh Snake paused as he tried to formulate his words. "I can't describe it. I never thought about replacing my Seraphim. I love it far too much to get rid of it. The mechs that I've piloted before are all good machines, but they don't fit my style." "What do you mean when you use the word style?" Vess asked, wondering if it had anything to do with the X factor. "My play style. My way of fighting. Something like that. The Seraphim just clicks with me in a way no other flyer could. It's like we're part of the same brainwave. I can feel my passion engulfing the entire mech when I'm deeply engaged in a fight. No other mech can make me feel this good." "All right. Let me ask you something else. Have you ever experienced a moment where your mech gave you a push? For example, did the mech warn you of danger while you were unaware of it? Were there moments when you thought doing something was impossible, but you still managed to achieve it because your mech gave you a helping hand?" The Seventh Snake fell into silence. "I don't recall any moments like that. I'm always in full control of my mech. What I'm pretty sure of is I feel more at ease with the Seraphim. It's easier to play at my best when I'm piloting the Seraphim than with any other mech. I've even bought your Phantasm and Nomad models, but I never could get quite as comfortable when I play with. Maybe it's the lack of wings. I've fallen in love with flying." Vess asked the Seventh Snake some other questions. What distinguished a good pilot and a great one? Are mechs better when they are smaller or larger? Does he believe in metaphysics? The young pilot's answer revealed no surprises. The boy wasn't aware of the X factor, nor did he seek to pursue anything magical. Vess formed an image of the young potentate. Young, wealthy, and well-trained. His view of the mech world had been colored by the many teachings of his tutors. It was therefore no surprise that they avoided telling him about the X factor. A young man like him had no business chasing after a fantasy. "I have one last question." Vess wrapped up the interview. Try to take a moment before you answer this. Do you believe your mech is alive? I don't know," the Seventh Snake replied with a confused expression. He scratched his head, trying to recall the times when he piloted the Seraphim. "I'm not delusional. Of course it's not alive. The Seraphim's a great mech, but it doesn't have an AI as far as I know. What I can say is that piloting my Seraphim makes me feel more alive than anything else." "All right. Thank you for taking the time to tell me about your experiences. Goodbye. I hope I helped." "You certainly did. Don't worry about it. Can I ask you something before you go? Are you going to put more one-star mechs on the market?" Vess shook his head. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't plan to do so. I've sold most of my one-star licenses, so I can't construct any new one-star mechs. My hands are kind of full trying to start up my real universe mech business. Oh, so you're a real mech designer? No wonder. That's not to say I still don't have a use for Iron Spirit. Vess responded carefully, naturally not mentioning that earning massive DP was his main reason for sticking around. Once I earn some revenue, I'm transitioning to 2-star mechs. The profit margin is better in that tier. He would also have an easier time to reach beyond his limited customer base in Cloudy Curtain. In a few months, he'd hopefully gain enough skills to produce a competitive design. After shutting down the game, Vess stood up and stretched his limbs, mentally re-examining the interview. Seventh Snake spoke with a peculiar accent that reminded him of the officials working in the capital of Cloudy Curtain. Despite his good upbringing, the young potentate described his piloting in the same vague way as the veterans did when describing their incredible feats that others thought involved the X-Factor. In other words, the interview provided inconclusive results. Vess hadn't come much closer to understanding the elusive X-Factor. Was it some kind of energy that hid inside a mech? Was it some evolutionary catalyst that manifested in only a couple of pilots? There's one thing all interviews about the X-Factor have in common. Love, affection, grief, vengeance. Whatever was the case, most of the extraordinary performances mentioned in the Galactic Net were backed by strong and unrestrained emotions. It seemed unrelated. What do emotions have to do with the performance of a mech? That's like suggesting that an air car can fly faster if the driver felt happy or angry. It made no sense. But an air car doesn't have a neural interface, Vess remarked, as he thought he found a clue. The neural interface allows mech pilots to receive sensory input from the mech, allowing them to treat the frame like it's their own body. Any decision a mech pilot makes is sent as output through the same interface, thus causing the mech to move according to its commands. Vess went back to his terminal and sought out a few articles about the neural interface. The neural interface was a highly restricted and highly controlled piece of hardware. Under no circumstances did any manufacturer allow the neural interface to leak out unnecessary signals. Excessive sensory input would overload a pilot's brains, while excessive movement output would cause the mech to lose control. The neural interface was strictly programmed to detect and block unauthorized signals, and technicians checked them frequently if they weren't tampered with. Pretty much every mech designer and technician trusted the neural interface to work as advertised. If thousands of industry insiders are sure there's nothing fishy with the neural interface, then it's not the source of the X-Factor. Emotions also elicit brain signals. And since those were different from the sensory and movement signals, they were explicitly blocked by the neural interface. But what if those signals are inseparable? Could emotions be conveyed through the same signals, therefore making it impossible for the neural interface to filter them out? For example, if a mech held a sword over a fallen enemy, did its pilot's desire to kill his opponent get blended in with the same signal that commanded the mech to thrust down its sword? If a mech spotted missiles flying in its direction, did an emotion like fear accompany its sensor signals of the incoming threat? Unfortunately, Vess had no background in the neural sciences. Everything he learned about the neural interface in college was how to install it and how to maintain it. The designer had no need to know how the gadget worked in order to use it in their designs. This left Vess unable to answer this question. I don't think all those other people who have hunted down the X-Factor are that stupid. If someone like me can think of it, I'm sure they exhausted themselves to death trying to see if the neural interface was capable of doing more. In the end, Vess was stuck again. With no solid theory on how to achieve the X-Factor, Vess had no starting point in designing a mech that incorporated it. With the huge interest payment looming over him, time began to run out for him. He could not waste the remaining days on a fruitless quest. Lucky chose this time to barge inside. With a nonchalant walk, the mechanical cat dropped the shiny blue sapphire before Vess's feet. It then nuzzled his legs with its slim but lively body. Another gem, I see. At least you didn't bury it in the backyard again. Vess picked up the sparkling blue gem and inspected it briefly before storing it in a small safe. Good job, buddy. Vess took a break. He picked up his gem cat and sank down on a sofa. He scratched the cat's metallic hide, not really sure if the cat even felt his fingers, but sure acting like it did. Lucky closed its eyes as it lay down comfortably on Vess's lap. As he looked at Lucky, a strange thought inserted in his head. Are you alive? The cat kept purring, as if he didn't understand the question. But Vess knew the gem cat was smarter than he looked. It possessed an AI way more sophisticated than the thoughts of an average household cat. What is life? The age-old question of life engendered a lot of controversy over the years. Many scientists mentioned that life had the ability to learn, adapt, and reproduce. These clinical definitions of life try to encompass all manner of life, including even the tiniest bacteria. That made the definition far too broad to be of use in this situation. Instead, Vess wondered if Lucky could be called a living being. Sure, he probably couldn't mate with another mechanical cat, but Lucky was no different from any other pet. Whether Lucky's responses formed spontaneously or through a large script of possible responses, it didn't matter. Humans worked in the same way if one pulled up their microscopes and sunk deeper into a person's cells and DNA. I don't care what the scientists and experts say. Since you're capable of expressing your emotions, you're alive in my book. Vess was also pretty certain the key to unlocking the X Factor lay in emotions. If Lucky could express emotions like love, hate, fear, and disgust, why not a mech? Certainly, a mech didn't possess the programming to ferment such redundant thoughts in the eyes of scientists. But what if a mech bypassed the neural blockade? It could borrow the pilot's complex neural system to form its own emotions. Since the mech neurally connected to its pilot's brain, its emotions mirrored the pilot's own feelings. A mech's anger would neatly mirror its pilot's own hostility towards an opponent. This would only enhance a pilot's current mood and not display anything abnormal in the neural interface. I'm kind of reaching out there. How can a novice designer like me get it right while countless of experts missed this gap? At this point, Vess stopped caring about the opinions of others. He kept it simple. Lucky is alive. The system is also a living being. If these two entities are capable of life, then I believe that mechs can also live. If he presented these words to one of the researchers who studied the X Factor for decades, he'd be laughed and ridiculed at. It was a stupid-sounding argument that relied entirely on subjective anecdotal experience. But when he looked down and stroked Lucky's back, he felt no regrets. I can't phrase it in any better way, but my faulty logic doesn't matter. My belief is enough. My heart tells me I'm looking in the right direction, and that's good enough. Now Vess had finally obtained a somewhat coherent picture of the relation between life and the X Factor. He felt as if a weight had disappeared. Now, I have to put theory into practice. Vess was ready to design a new mech, one that hopefully unlocked the X Factor.